I really don't think people realize how utterly insane the Lions were and also still are. This team was in a division with two other playoff teams, lost almost an entire starting roster's worth of players to injured reserve by the time we got to Thanksgiving, and still ended up as the highest seed in a loaded conference last year. And yes, sure, they didn't win the Super Bowl because all those injuries finally caught up to them at the worst possible time, i.e. the playoffs, but the fact that they even got that far in the first place through all of the adversity that they faced throughout the season is a testament to how special this group was. And also, again, still is. If you're new here, this is day 16 of the annual Bootleg Summer Series, and obviously, it's a big one. In each one of these episodes, we use film, analytics, salary cap breakdowns, and all manner of nitty-gritty football nerddom to answer the three questions that make up the central pillar of this series. What was this team's identity before? What is their identity now? And what does a successful 2025 season for this team actually look like? It's tough to define that last question for the Lions, obviously, because on one hand, I mean, they're smack dab in the middle of a championship window that's been open for a couple seasons at this point. And on the other, there's a whole lot of change happening all at once in that building right now. So is this more of a reload year or a rebirth year? I guess we'll find that answer together. So Jay, Autumn, Anthony, roll the intro.
It is Lions Day on the Bootleg Summer Preview Series, and when I'm talking about the Lions these days, I have to start with the man at the top. Dan Campbell has completely transformed this franchise. Full stop. It is not even the same animal anymore, and that is a great thing for Detroit. He deserves full credit for the turnaround because he has proven to be a tremendous leader. And that leadership is going to be tested this year because he lost both his coordinators. So he is going to have to prove that he can do what every great coach does after a sustained run of success, which is what the Lions have had, and reload. So today, we're going to talk about the ammunition he's got to do that and whether or not we think he's going to pull it off. Brett, you believe in Mr. Campbell to do this? Because it's a pretty high hill to climb.
If anybody could survive this, and there's a lot of changes here, obviously, new OC, new DC. You have a rookie center replacing a franchise legend in Frank Ragnow, a guy who didn't play center in college. He's converting from guard, and oh, by the way, he's one of the many second rounders who still haven't signed yet as of the time of recording this, so I don't even know if he's going to practice. So new play callers on both sides of the ball, new center that's never called protections before, not even practicing. Like, all of this is bad. And yet, if anybody could make it work, it's Dan Campbell, because we've already seen him work his magic before. The Lions were arguably the most downtrodden franchise, not just in American football, but in all of sports, decade after decade after decade of futility. And this man showed up and he rebuilt them from the ground up and created one of the most indomitable cultures I've ever seen in this league. People forget. In mid-December, the Lions had 21 players on injured reserve. Like almost an entire starting lineup was on IR, and they still got the 1 seed. They still beat a 14-win Vikings team in the last week of the season to get the 1 seed. Obviously, didn't work out for them in the end because they just sustained so many injuries that they couldn't finish the job. But the fact that they even got there in the first place is a testament to how good Dan Campbell is. It wasn't just that he had great coordinators and a great quarterback and obviously a great center. It was that he held that entire building together through all of their adversity, losing literally their best player like 5-6 weeks into the season. Nobody else could have done that, at least in Lions history, than Dan Campbell. So again, do I think that they're going to be bad this year? No. Do I think that they're going to win the division? I don't know yet. But I think the regression narrative is a little bit overblown because they should have already regressed in the middle of last year and they didn't. So I think they can make it work.
I think the fact that nobody really talks about those times and we're only 3 full seasons removed from again, decades of struggle as a football franchise. And when people look at the Lions now, they don't talk about that. And that's staggering because that's all anybody talked about with the Lions forever. And one guy showed up, two, if you argue with Brad Holmes, and I would because he's been instrumental in rebuilding this team as well. But two guys show up with a new program, have a funny introductory press conference. Everybody goes, oh no, they're doomed again. And here we are 3 years later, and nobody even brings that stuff up because they have been so good through so much. Dan Campbell, I'm with you. If anybody can handle this level of challenge, and it is a high level of challenge in the NFL to lose that much coaching horsepower, it'd be Dan. So one side of my brain says, oh yeah, regression is totally reasonable and they'll absolutely do it. And the other side of my brain says, but Dan Campbell. And that's amazing.
I think one of the most interesting fork in the roads in recent NFL history, and if you're a Dolphins fan, I apologize for bringing this up. So Dan Campbell was the interim head coach in Miami back in 2015. And the building obviously loved him because how can you not love Dan Campbell? Every player on that roster adored him and was scratching and clawing and fighting every single week to try to win for that man as their interim head coach. And I'm not saying that, the results were there yet when he was the interim, but you could see the team never quit on him. And you kind of saw some similarities in those 2015 Dolphins teams in a lost year to Dan Campbell's early work in Detroit, where it's like they weren't very good, but by God, they were playing hard. And I thought that there was a real shot that Miami was going to hire him, from interim and make him the full head coach, and they didn't. They hired Adam Gase. And I don't know if I can think of a steeper drop-off in head coaching effectiveness than Dan Campbell to Adam Gase. So just kind of an interesting what if the Dolphins kept him around? Would he still be coaching in Miami? I think it's very possible that he could have been. Could he have built the Dolphins into what the Lions are now? I think it's very possible because clearly the man knows how to hire good assistants and clearly he knows how to build a culture. And you see what the Dolphins are now compared to what the Lions are now. I'm not saying the Dolphins are a bad team, but if we're looking at the level of culture and toughness that the Dolphins aspire to be, they kind of already had the guy in the building that could have built that, and they let him walk away. Just a really, really interesting what if.
There's so many of those in the NFL. And again, you can never say that he was ready at the time. Maybe he learned a lot of things through that process and being let go that, again, led him to be the coach that he is now. But you have to believe that the sort of kernels of who he is as a coach and a leader were already there. And you have to wonder.
So let's get into our 2024 recap and effectiveness summary here. Obviously, one of the best teams in the league and also one of the deepest teams in the league because you can't win 15 games while losing 21 players without being really, really, really deep.
And one of the teams whose numbers reflect their performance very well. It's not one of the teams that we're saying, oh, they're better than their numbers or, oh, they're not as good as their numbers. No, they're exactly as good as their numbers, and their numbers are really good. 15-2 overall, first in the division, outdueled the Vikings last year to win the NFC North, which was a tough fight, but they didn't give any ground. Home record of 7-2. These folks are road warriors, 8-0 on the road. That is extremely impressive. Last 5 games, 4-1, and they needed every one of them to win that division. We talk about their effectiveness summary. That's our bootleg power score. We take their league ranks for rushing the ball, passing the ball, stopping the run and the pass, and then points scored and points allowed. And whenever we do these summaries, if you look at all 6 of those numbers and only one of them is in double digits, you're going to be looking at a pretty good score. That's the Lions. Again, their numbers reflected their dominance. Passing offense with Ben Johnson at the helm, 3rd. Rushing offense, 5th. Jahmyr Gibbs was a sensation and really powered this offense last year. Pass defense, 6th. The only number that slipped outside the top 10, and it was barely, was rush defense, and that was 12th. Points scored, number 1 in the NFL. Big gold star. Lions led the league in scoring, and points allowed, they were only 7th. So again, 6 numbers, only one of them outside the top 10. You add it up, divide by 6, you get the 3rd most powerful team in the NFL. And they looked that way on the field for almost all of the year until the very end when they simply ran out of horsepower. Too many guys on injured reserve, couldn't keep going in the playoffs. But all year, they were one of the toughest outs in the league.
And I think one of the most impressive things about this team's record wasn't just the damage they did to teams the week that they played them. It was the damage they did to them the week after. Like, how many teams have a known named phenomena where you play them and then you almost automatically lose the following game? I don't know what the final record was by the end of the season, but I know in the first 6-7 weeks, like, teams were literally winless in the week following their game against the Lions, and their average margin of defeat was more than a touchdown. So, this team beats you up. They are physical. They are aggressive. They hate to punt. They hate to kick field goals. Like, they're not going to give you any plays off. They make you play on all 4 downs, just like Philly does. And, that's a lot of wear and tear on the opposing team. They kind of out-tough you in a lot of ways. And I think they made up for their not personnel weaknesses, but their injury situation. They made up for their injury situation last year with just toughness and aggressiveness. And, it went a long way to going 15-2.
Yeah, they are a team forged in the image of their leader. And as a former player, Dan Campbell deeply understands what it takes to win in the NFL. And as we go through the power structure, we're going to see a lot of folks that are former players. He is not alone, and he enjoys employing former players as coaches, and he's picked some really good ones. So it's certainly the tone he sets at the top of the organization, but all of these guys, we're talking about the run game coordinator, the quarterbacks coach, the offensive assistants, the running backs coach. These are all former players. So they all understand what it takes to win at their particular position. And, I'm going to say not only the schematic side, not only the physical traits side that we talk about in the draft all the time, but the mental side, the grind of it, the physical toughness to last throughout a very long season, actually longer than when any of these guys played. It's even more games now. So that sort of transcends all the way down from the top, and you see it. These guys hit. It takes a toll on the opponent during the game. And yeah, there's even an effect, sort of halo effect that goes into the week after. And they like it like that. We all kind of giggled when he said, you're going to fight them, and then we're going to bite their kneecaps. And we're all like, what, bite the kneecaps? That's how they play. Like, so much of what gets said in opening press conferences never really translates onto the field. Every bit of that has translated onto the field, and I agree with you. It has made a difference in the overall outcome for this team, because sort of when everything gets down to even and you're tired and you're missing guys and whatever else, they're just going to keep swinging, and not all teams do.
I know we have our coaching section where we look at the power structure, and there's a lot of new there, and we're going to spend a long time talking about a lot of new. But I want to talk about what they lost. And I think that the story of this team is as much about what they did in 2024 as it is what we think they're going to do in 2025. And what they did in 2024 was, quite frankly, remarkable. Dan Campbell held everything together from a culture standpoint. But if we're looking at how Aaron Glenn held this defense together from a schematic standpoint, that might have been even more impressive. And I think the Jets got themselves a hell of a coach. But if you're looking at, honestly, it's like 3, maybe even 4 phases of this defense throughout the year. You have the Aiden Hutchinson phase. You have the post-Aiden injury phase where, like, Aleem McNeil went on a tear, and, he was doing his thing, kind of, keeping the pass rush together almost by himself. Anzalone was getting a bunch of turnovers. Then, Aleem gets hurt. Anzalone gets hurt. You go into the next phase of this defense where, at that point, I think there was a Thursday night game where they had like 3 week 1 defensive starters left and they still won. That was the third phase of this defense where Glenn just kind of had to cobble everything together. And then you get to like the last phase of the defense where he's like, fuck it, we're calling 0. And it worked. And that's how they beat Minnesota. They couldn't survive on that forever, but like you see all the different iterations of what Aaron Glenn was trying to do. And there was some connective tissue there. Like this team was the most man coverage heavy team in the NFL. Looking at the exact number here, 35% they called cover one, which is outrageous by NFL standards. And if you're looking at how that breaks down by down and distance, also side note, if you want this down and distance data, that is available on the Patreon in our companion infographic. Go to the QR code on the screen or the link in the description below, and you get overall coverage data, down and distance coverage data, blitz rates, cap expenditures, run concept rates, the whole shebang. But if you're looking at by down and distance, they were 9th in man coverage on first down. They were 1st in man coverage on second down, and they were 1st in man coverage on third down. So they played a little bit more zone on early downs to try to stop the run. And then once they got into passing situations, 2nd and medium, 2nd and long, 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, it was man coverage all day. And that was kind of the one piece that carried over from phase to phase in this Lions defense. But everything else was kind of a shifting landscape here because they had to completely rethink how they rushed the passer post Aiden injury. And then once Aleem went down, they had to completely rethink it again. And you would think that there was a huge drop off, but shockingly, there really wasn't. Pre-Aiden injury, this team was 8th in pressure percentage on true drop back passes, which is obviously really good. Post Aiden injury, they were 11th. Like, that's actually kind of insane to lose arguably the most effective pass rusher in the NFL. You can argue for Myles Garrett and Max Crosby and all that, but if you're just looking at stats, Aiden was the most effective pass rusher in the NFL last year, pre-injury. You lose him and you only drop 3 spots. That's pretty insane. And then after Aleem got hurt, you might think, oh, now they're really going to fall off a cliff. Nope. They went up to 4th, EJ. In the last month of the season, they went up to 4th. They got better.
You know why I remember that? Is because we said, oh, Aiden went down. It's over. And then Aleem came out of nowhere and we're like, okay, like pretty cool to see somebody step up into that breach because obviously it's a huge loss, huge shoes to fill. He was playing at a super high level. We're talking about a defensive MVP for the league level. To lose a player like that, and as you say, step down only a hair, and then he went down and we were like, no, that's it. It's over. And like 2 weeks later, we checked in with each other. We're like, they're better? We're like, no, that can't be right. Look up the numbers. No, they're better. How? And they get to the playoffs. We're like, that's it. They're out of dudes. It's not just those two. They're just out of dudes. And he unleashes the zero onslaught. And we're like, oh my God, it worked. Just a crazy, crazy arc throughout the season for this defense.
Yeah, I mean, that last regular season game literally was a playoff game, right? Because you're fighting for a bye. You're fighting for the 1 seed compared to the 5 seed. Like, I consider that to be a playoff game. And when he came out and just called zero over and over and over again, keep in mind, post Aleem McNeil injury, they led the league in zero. They called it more on third down specifically than cover 2 and quarters combined. Right. That's how much zero they called in passing situations. But it was because they had to. Like Aaron Glenn's like, I'm not just going to sit there and rush 4 like we did early on in the year. Like, I could play one rat and rush 4 like like I did in week 5 when I had Aiden, but it's not going to do anything. So he's like, screw it. We're going to call zero and we're going to send more guys mathematically than you can block so that the quality of the pass rusher doesn't matter as much. At that point, it's just a math equation. And we're going to rely on our DBs to tackle. Or more specifically, we're going to rely on Sam Darnold to shit the bed, which he did. It worked. But like I really can't speak highly enough about Aaron Glenn because of how he was forced to adjust over and over and over again. And he did it over and over and over again. And like I rarely have ever seen, like we've seen defensive turnarounds that are really good before, obviously. I mean, shit, we just talked about one with the Ravens last week, but I've rarely ever seen a defensive turnaround like that through that many injuries. Like, it's truly incredible. And that's honestly why he got the Jets job, right? It showed how adaptable he is. It showed how smart he is. It showed how good of a leader he is to kind of keep that room together through all that adversity. Like, the Jets really, really got themselves a good one. So, Do I think the Lions defense is going to fall off a cliff? No, I don't. Do I think that it's going to be really, really hard for Kelvin Shepherd to fill those shoes and get this defense playing to the level that Aaron Glenn did, considering those circumstances? Like, that's almost an impossible act to follow.
It's a crazy amount of coaching acumen, and as much respect as we had for both of these coordinators, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, when they were with Detroit, I find it fascinating throughout this offseason what we've learned about them since they've moved on. Because look, head coaches, especially new head coaches, have a lot more opportunities to talk to the media than coordinators do throughout the NFL. And watching Aaron Glenn navigate the Jets offseason and who he kept and who he let go, how he addressed the Aaron Rodgers situation, it speaks to a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily have gotten to see or didn't get to see when he was a coordinator with Detroit. And with Ben in Chicago, it's the same deal. Like, we knew Ben was a tremendous offensive strategist, one of the very best in the NFL, if not the best over the past 3 seasons. But what I've learned about him as he's become the head coach of the team that I follow is just what a psychopath he is. And I say that with all love intended. Like, Ben is so incredibly hyper-focused on success in football. And I say that broadly now that he's a head coach, not just on offense. And the lengths he's willing to go to achieve that, and the standards that he's going to hold people to, you really see how the sausage got made in Detroit, how that offense was that good, how they were always on time, on down and distance, how they could pressure people, and how he could seemingly pull trick plays out of his butt at any given time when any other risk-averse coach in the NFL is like, oh no, and just do it week after week and have it work, because he just stresses execution and timing and really just rigor, how rigorous he is. And that's what all the Bears players have said to a man is, oh no, he told us this is going to be really hard. He told us this was not going to be fun, and that he was going to hold us to a very high standard, and that it was not going to be easy, and that we were going to learn together. He's putting their feet to the fire, and he's been doing the same thing. That's what has powered that success that we see on Sundays and just go, oh man, he's a great offensive coach. Well, why? Because he's down in the weeds with the details, holding people accountable, learning with them. And it's the same for both of those guys that have moved on. And just assuming that even if you get a great football coach, and I think the Lions have clearly gotten good football coaches to replace them, that you're going to get all that other stuff, that leadership, that drive, that ability to hold a room together, that toughness, that detail orientation. That's a lot. And, it's unlikely that you're going to get all of that for both of them. So when we talk about regression, it's mostly because they set an impossibly high standard last year, and expecting anybody, especially two anybodies, to step up and be at that level, which was elite in the NFL on both sides of the ball, is, it's a little bit of wishful thinking. Like, are they going to be good? Is the team going to be good? Yeah, we both agree that Dan Campbell's going to pull these guys through the mud no matter what, and that they're not going to be an easy out. They're not going to be a soft football team. They are going to be well coached, well led, and fight you every single week. But again, you started it off by saying what they did last year was exceptional and elite, and it is. And just assuming exceptionalism and elite results, it's a bit much.
You mentioned the trick play component to the Ben Johnson experience, and obviously the Lions were known for just calling crazy off-the-wall trick plays like every single game. No matter what the score was, they could be up by 20 points. It didn't matter. Like, they were going to call crazy stuff. And I have a very specific theory about why they called so many trick plays, even in blowout games. Because the first reaction is going to be like, oh, why didn't they save that for a big game? Like, why bust it out when you're up by like 3 touchdowns against Chicago? Yep. And I have a very specific theory about why they kept doing that. And it's because if you're looking at the rest of the Lions offense, they were kind of boring. And not boring in a negative way, boring in the sense that you knew exactly what they were going to do. Again, if you're referencing the companion infographic that we have here, where we break down under center rates, shotgun rates, run concepts, play action, everything like that. This team was first in under center. They were first in play action. They were third in outside zone overall. Like they called outside zone 50% of the time, which is a hell of a lot by NFL standards. They were not higher than 16th in any other individual run concept. They called outside zone over and over and over again. And so if you're looking at this offense, like the normal offense, they just look like, what Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak called in like the 80s and 90s. It was just repeatedly lining up under center. Okay, we're going to call outside zone with Jahmyr Gibbs or Monty, and they're going to rip off explosives because our offensive line is better than you and our running back is better than you. And then, Jared Goff is really good at under center play action, which is not a common skill set, by the way, because you got to flip your eyes to the defense, then turn back quickly, locate, read it out, pull the trigger. And so they weaponized that, right? They weaponized the monotony of that outside zone, outside zone, outside zone, play action, wash, rinse, repeat. And if we get to 3rd and 5 and you give us man coverage, cool, we got Amon-Ra and you're screwed anyway. And those little trick plays, to bring it all full circle, those little trick plays to break up the monotony, I think was really more for the psychology of their own players, right? It was giving them something to look forward to every single week. It was giving them something to keep them engaged of like, hey, we're putting this in on a Tuesday and, we're going to maybe tweak it a little bit on Wednesday and Thursday and maybe like, God, what was that clip from the quarterback show where Jared Goff was talking about how the fake fumble play,
the stumble bum,
the fumble bum or stumble bum. And, Johnson had seen the Packers unintentionally do it, right? And it worked. And so Ben was like, oh, we're going to put that in as a trick play. And the iteration or the version of it that it started out early in the week was not what actually ended up happening later in the week. They just kind of kept iterating on it throughout the week. And that keeps guys locked in. That keeps them engaged. That gives them something to look forward to because they know like, hey, we have a really fun play that's like super interesting and super cool. And we're just waiting for it to come through on the radio. And so we're fighting to put ourselves in a position where we can justify calling the fun play. We're gonna fight to get down to the 5-yard line because we got something really cool for Penei Sewell this week in the low red zone. Like, let's do it. Like, let's just kind of grind and earn the right to call the fun play. And it breaks up the monotony. It breaks up the machine-like nature of this offense. And it just kind of, I don't know, it just lets guys be dudes. Right?
Yeah, it's dessert. And you eat your vegetables first, right? Ben Johnson told the guys all season and all, like, I expect you to do the basics. If we don't do the basics, we're not going to do the fun stuff. But if we do the basics and we execute, again, to this near psychotic level of perfection, I've got something for you. And he had something for him every week, whether or not they used it. And I always laughed when people were like, because we've just been conditioned as NFL fans and analysts and everything else that trick plays are these incredibly rare, super high leverage moments. You got to have one in your back pocket that the one time you see that look in 3 years, you saved it. How often do we hear about this on special teams? Oh yeah, I saw that back in 2019 and I, busted it out in 2024 because I just squirreled it away and it was perfect. And I had sat on it like an egg for 5 years and then we hatched it and we won the game, right? So we just have this sort of predisposed notion that trick plays are these incredibly rare birds that you only pull out if they're exactly perfect. And then the Lions start pulling out trick plays like every week. Like every week they're pulling out one or every other week. And we're just like, well, the frequency throws us off. And then people are like, well, if they're so rare throughout this, the highest league in the world, he can't have that many. And I just giggle at that notion that Ben Johnson wouldn't usher you into his study and show you racks upon racks of like leather-bound volumes on the shelf and be like, every one of those has 75 trick plays in it. I want to get to some of them before I die, so I'm going to have 5 on tap every week, and we're going to pull one out and use it because he just thinks like that. It excites him. He obviously has like, he's like, oh no, I've got more. Don't worry about that. We're just going to keep rolling them out. And it does. If you have to prepare for that and you're expecting it because it's been happening with that kind of frequency and you're an opposing head coach, you're having to spend time as a defensive coach preparing for that stuff. You're having to get your guys ready to say, look, the base stuff is hard enough to deal with. And here's what we need to do to execute to try and keep up with that. But by the way, there's an extremely high likelihood you're going to see some crazy shit. So be ready. You have to spend some practice time on that, which in the NFL is limited and very valuable. And it just keeps opposing defenses on their toes too, that it's not always going to be the same thing. And it's not like the same type of trick play. We're going to pull out all the stops whenever we want, and you got to be ready for it.
It's one of those, hey, we know we have a right tackle that can run routes and catch. Do you have a defensive end that can cover? We're going to find out.
Let's find out.
As far as game management, this is another thing I want to bring up here, because in the infographic, we have a game management page. And I don't know if we brought this up a whole lot throughout the series, but it's interesting data to have. And a couple of the tidbits we have are fourth down go rate in the red zone. So how often do you go for it on fourth down in the red zone, as well as fourth down go versus punt in no man's land. This is a very niche stat that I was thinking of for Detroit when I first was throwing this together, because I was like, I'm sure they're in the lead. And they were. So if you're in no man's land and you're making the decision to punt versus go for it, how often do you go for it? Detroit went for it 37.5% of the time. That led the NFL. And as far as fourth down go rate in the red zone, they went for it 47.8% of the time. Also led the NFL. So this was a coaching staff that trusted their players to execute in high leverage situations. And, I think what makes that strategy work is treating it like the volume game that it is. Because if you go for it and then you get too scared to go for it again, if you fail, then you're just 0 for 1. But if you know that you're going to make it work more than 50% of the time, you have to go for it that often, right? You have to do it 3 times in a game, not once in a game, because you trust that your players are good enough to get you the second 2 out of those 3. And all of a sudden you're positive on the scale, right? So it's not just about going for it. It's about going for it and then continuing to go for it and sticking to that plan and having the almost blind faith in your players to execute that you need to in order to make the law of averages work out in your favor. But you have to trust it. And Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson trusted it, sometimes using those trick plays on those fourth downs. And it worked for them because they stayed committed.
I think we talk about teams with complementary parts, right? Offense complementing the defense, and certainly this team does this. It goes deeper than that with the Lions. It's a coaching staff complementing the player's strength. It's the scouting staff with Brad Holmes, who we'll talk about in a minute, delivering the sort of raw materials that Dan Campbell's going to work with that he needs. And again, a very strong handshake between those two. And then the trust, the ability to bring those players along, the ability to share experiences as former players, like it all locks together. And it really had to kind of break that, whatever you want to call it, Detroit, a curse, just a long period of football mediocrity. You sort of needed all those elements to weld together, but it so rarely happens in the NFL. And we're literally getting to watch it happen in front of us in real time. And it's a joy. As a football analyst, watching what the Lions are now, watching a team struggle for 50 years is not fun. Like eventually you just feel bad for them. You're like, oh man, I wish, maybe this is the year. It's not. It just gets boring after a while. And it's sad. It was sad for Detroit football fans. They know about all this. But to watch all those elements hit at the same time and work together, what you get is a 15-2 team. What you get is a team that will not quit no matter what, no matter how many players go down, that, brings offensive explosion and just dominates on that side of the ball. And I can't call it anything other than a joy. In my job, watching Detroit Lions football is now a joy. And if there's a miracle, that's it. That's the miracle that Dan Campbell brought.
And I also, there's there's something so gratifying, and I'm not a Lions fan, so I can't fully speak to the emotions of this, but I would love to hear from Lions fans in the comments about this, especially from older Lions fans that went through the disappointment of, okay, Barry Sanders retired without ever reaching the promised land. We had Megatron retired without ever reaching the promised land, and we had Matt Stafford, Ndamukong Suh, but really more so Stafford, of like, okay, here's this franchise icon who was just battling his ass off for this team and for this city through some of the worst years in franchise history. And boy, that's saying a lot. Literally a winless season. That's really hard to do. It's almost as hard to be a winless team as it is to be an undefeated team. And when the Stafford trade happened, I'm sure there was a lot of Lions fans that were like, God, we did it again. Like we had this icon who was really, he was here for this city. He got us through a lot of tough times, and it happened again. And they made the trade for Jared Goff, and obviously there's the whole Goff component of it, where Goff was also in a franchise that was really, really struggling, and they had recently been to a Super Bowl, but it almost felt like he never fully got embraced by Rams fans, and at the same time, it almost felt like he never fully got embraced by the coaching staff that inherited him, i.e. the Sean McVay coaching staff, because he was a Jeff Fisher draft pick. And so when they shipped off Stafford, I know that hurt a lot for Lions fans, because it's like, man, I really wish that we could have won one with and for Stafford. And then you get Jared Goff, who had come into this team almost like a wounded deer, right? Because he felt like his team had given up on him. And I'm sure there's a lot of really, really heavy emotions with that. But for Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell to not only see Stafford then immediately go win a ring with the Rams, and I'm sure there's a lot of complex emotions there for Lions fans, because they're happy for Stafford, but they're also sad that it didn't happen to Detroit. But to also then bring in Jared Goff, who must have been going through an incredibly tough emotional time in his own right, feeling that rejection and that lack of belief in him as a player, and to build Goff up to be a better version than he ever was in LA. And this is a quarterback who made the freaking Super Bowl, right? He outdueled Patrick Mahomes on Monday Night Football in one of the greatest games of all time. He had a lot of really successful offenses in LA. And to see him come to them so, I don't want to use the word distraught, but it couldn't have felt good. And to build him up and to build the whole program up around Jared Goff and with Jared Goff, and to go from where they were to where they are now, if I was a Lions fan, I would feel so incredibly gratified by that and so incredibly proud of that, to be a part of that and to embrace Jared Goff, and to embrace this new coaching regime, and just to quite literally, or not literally, but figuratively climb out of the mud together as a team and as a city after all of that disappointment and the low point of like, fuck, we messed up the Stafford era. To come from that low point and to reach the highs together, I can't imagine how good a feeling that is for all involved, not just the people in the building, but the people in the city around the building that have put decades into this. I think it's got to be, short of obviously them winning a Super Bowl, it's got to be the best feeling in the world for that fan base.
I would say it's a tremendous relief. And again, you couldn't believe in Detroit football. You could be a Lions fan, but you had to suspend disbelief to believe that this franchise was ever going to be good, because you'd seen every possible way for them to be bad. And you couldn't trust what people said. I mean, the Matt Patricia era was full of coach speak that never manifested, off season, on season, didn't matter. And there was a lot of that around the Stafford and Goff trade, right? Because even us, when they said, oh no, Goff's our guy, we're like, Goff's your guy for now. Goff's your guy that you got to play the position until you get the guy you want, but you're a new regime in the NFL. You're going to bring in your own quarterback. And they steadfastly said from moment one, no, Jared's that guy. And we were like, sure, okay, whatever. Coach Peak.
Oh yeah, I fully admit I didn't believe in it.
No,
I
said
thought that it was a stopgap.
Totally said that on a podcast multiple times, right? Cool. They got a guy that can play for this year, but we all know that they're gonna, take their shot. They're gonna draft a quarterback high, and that's gonna be the start of their rebuilding era, because that's what new coaches and GMs do. Well, no, not this pair. And as a Lions fan, you can believe in that, and that's weird. They didn't believe it at the time. They're like, yeah, whatever. And now they're like, to your point, holy cow, this is our guy, right? And we're this good with him, and they said we were going to be, and now we are. And now you can believe, and that's a huge leap mentally and sort of emotionally for a city. It's amazing. So guys in charge of that transformation, Brad Holmes is the GM. Dan Campbell is the coach. We talked a lot about Dan Campbell. I want to talk a little bit about Brad Holmes, because if you look at his draft history over the last 3 years, we have praised his draft results every year after the draft. The last 3 years, we do a show on this channel where we talk about our favorite draft classes. And the Lions have always been in the running. But if you look at really 2023 and back for the last 3 years before that, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. That's the first four. And you can say what you want about Hendon Hooker or, Antoine Green not working out as a 7th round wide receiver, who I still liked. But if you start with those four who are all playing very important roles, prominent roles on this team right now and powering their success, that is a wildly successful draft. And everybody's like, oh, you had a lot of high picks. Well, there's a lot of teams that have a lot of high picks and don't hit on them, or hit on a 1 on a 2, or don't hit on either of their first round picks. We talked about some of those this week. That's not Brad Holmes. 2022, Aiden Hutchinson, arguably, when healthy, one of the very best defenders in the NFL, top 5 minimum. Jameson Williams. Took a while to get going, finally got weaponized last year, and you started to see the promise. Josh Paschal, a rotational guy on the defensive line. That's going to happen. You don't hit on every draft pick ever. Really good hit percentage is 30 to 40%. And as we go down through this, Kirby Joseph, okay, Malcolm Rodriguez, James Houston. These are all guys he got in the later rounds who are, play roles for this team that are very important. And then you go back to the big debate the year before that, 2021, Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase. What are we going to do? They choose Penei Sewell. They get Levi Onwuzurike, who has struggled with injuries but has been effective when he's on the field. Aleem McNeil, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th, Derek Barnes in the 4th. As a 3-year run, as a guy drafting in the NFL, which is an unsure science to be sure, that is historic stuff. That is how you rebuild a team from the ground up. When you're talking about, baseball teams, we're going to go with our farm system, right? We're going to get the young guys. We're going to draft and develop, right? It sounds good. It's hard to do in football. Player contracts and really lifespans in the NFL in terms of their playing career are a lot shorter. Again, if Dan Campbell had not turned this around in a couple of years, we would be talking about a very hot seat right now, or he would already be gone. If they had struggled and been a 5-win team for 3 years in a row, they'd be like, well, now it's a new regime. Now the roster gets turned over again. This kind of sustained success in the draft is incredibly difficult to do. And Brad Holmes deserves a lot of credit, and really the marriage between Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell agreeing on what type of player is a Lions player and bringing in bunches of them year after year that are really the core of this team now moving forward. The guys we're talking about, Penei Sewell, 4th, 5th year players, they're in the prime of their NFL playing career. And it's because 3 years ago and every year since, they've made a lot of the right decisions in the draft. So as much as we love Dan Campbell, we love Brad Holmes too.
And I love, that 2021 draft specifically, because I remember at the time there was fierce debate of would you rather have, let's just say best case scenario for receiver versus tackle, would you rather have an all-pro receiver or an all-pro tackle? And Brad Holmes is like, what do you mean or? I can get both. Amon-Ra's there in the 4th. What's this or you speak of, guys? Por qué no las dos? So to see consistent hits with early picks and with late picks. We've talked about some teams where it's like, they're really shitty early, but they're really good late. I look at the Niners. They clean up on day 3. They've been awful in the early rounds. I look at some teams that are really good at hitting their first round picks, but they're really, really bad on day 3. The Lions being good in both is so rare, like so exceptionally rare. And it's a big reason why, you can have 21 players go on IR and you still get the 1 seed because they've hit on the stars and the depth behind the stars. Not many teams could say the same.
Yeah, and to do it year after year is incredibly difficult. There's lots of GMs that have that one draft, right? Oh, it was amazing. And then you kind of go, well, don't look at the next year or really the year after
the 2017 Saints that literally carried them for half a decade.
100%.
They did nothing else.
And GMs are not super consistent. We say progress for players isn't linear. It's not for GMs either. If you look at John Schneider, a great GM, he had a very strong early run, built the Legion of Boom teams. They went to the Super Bowl. And then there was the time wandering through the desert where, okay, what are you doing, John? Not sure about value.
Or what are you doing, Pete?
Either
let's
way,
be honest about that one.
Again, it's the handshake, the marriage between the two, but it got off track. And now John Schneider, much like Brad Holmes, has been, pitching fastballs for the last 3 years. Brad Holmes has pitched nothing but fastballs since he got there. So that is extremely rare. Let's talk about the coordinators on this team because we've spent a lot of time saying, well, are they going to be able to do their jobs? We should talk about who they are. So the assistant head coach on this team is where I'll start. Scotty Montgomery, again, Dan Campbell's right-hand man, lieutenant, who's carrying out basically his wishes and building this vision just as strongly and is rewarded with the assistant head coach title because of it. The offensive coordinator is John Morton. So previously served as a passing game coordinator for the Broncos in 23 and 24. Before that, he was an offensive assistant with the Lions, had a cup of coffee with the Lions for 1 year in 2022. Previous coaching stops before that include the Jets, Saints, 49ers, Raiders, USC, among others. And as a player, again, this is going to be a theme throughout the coaching section of this podcast. He was in the CFL. He played in NFL Europe, and he was on a bunch of different practice squads in the NFL as a wide receiver. Defensive coordinator, Kelvin Shepard. Yes, that Kelvin Shepard was originally a Bill as the 68th overall pick in 2011 out of LSU, and he steps in to fill the very large shoes of Aaron Glenn. Special teams coordinator, Dave Phipp. And as we get into notable coaches, I'm going to spend a lot of time on offense because I know Lions fans are collectively wringing their hands about the loss of Ben Johnson, and rightfully so. He has been, again, the best in the NFL for the past 2 to 3 years. They kept Hank Fraley. This is probably the biggest coup going. I really hoped as a Bears fan that Hank Fraley was going to end up as either the OC or, much like he is here, the run game coordinator and offensive line coach in Chicago. Nothing would have made me happier because he was great as a player. He has been exceptional as a coach, developing that young, strong offensive line for the Lions. This was a big move for Dan Campbell. And I think he might have put his foot down a little bit and said, yes, Ben, you can go and you can take some other assets, but you don't get Hank. We're keeping Hank. David Shaw is the passing game coordinator. David Shaw was one of the hottest names in NFL coaching circles, ended up at Stanford for a long time, said he would never leave. Well, again, coaches say a lot of things that don't necessarily come true, but when you are looking at a very experienced, I'm just going to say football coach, not even because he has experience in both the NFL and college that's extensive, David Shaw is there. Mark Brunell is your quarterback's coach. And again, we're talking about key figures in developing Jared Goff behind the scenes or bringing him up to the level, which again is the highest level he's ever played at in his career. Mark Brunell, former Husky, former Jacksonville Jaguar, gets a lot of credit for that. Bruce Gradkowski is also there. Former Gruden quarterback is an offensive assistant. Marquez Tuiasosopo, I did not expect a Marquez Tuiasosopo sighting, is also an
in 2025. Really?
That's
wow.
Right. Another former Husky quarterback. So the Lions have a type. They like former Husky quarterbacks on their coaching staff. And then Tashard Choice. We were at the Shrine Bowl, and I was talking to Dan Casey. If you don't know Dan's work, you absolutely should. Puts up a play a day on Twitter, one of the most well-respected offensive coaching minds out there. And he was talking to a former college head coach who I got introduced to. And I said, hey, what are you doing in town? He said, oh, I'm here to, check out Shrine Bowl. I've never been before, but then I'm going to go see one of my former players. And I said, oh, yeah, who? And he said, Tashard Choice. He said, he just had a baby and he's doing great coaching where he was coaching. And not even 3 months later, guess who the new running backs coach for the Detroit Lions is? Yes, one Tashard Choice, also an NFL alum.
Great special teamer, by the way. Like, he's going to contribute to the special teams coaching in little ways as well, because he was a demon on punt cover.
Tashard Choice, throwback name for all those who've been watching the NFL for more than a minute. On defensive special teams, Deshae Townsend, defensive pass game coordinator and DB's coach, is in charge of what I would term as one of the most talented units in the NFL. He's got a lot of firepower to work with, but he also had to make up a lot of ground last year with injuries and with a pass rush that changed, not every week, but every couple of weeks in front of him. And again, coverage supports the rush and rush supports coverage. They are linked together. They are not two separate entities. And to be able to continue to make those adjustments to make the overall defense effective and not have big gap responsibility breaks that lead to explosive plays that lead to losses, Deshae Townsend deserves a lot of credit.
So moving into March, which set up everything that Brad Holmes did in the draft, because once again, he's Brad Holmes, so he had a really nice draft again. We'll kind of go through losses, then retentions, then third-party additions. These are more notable names on each respective list. If you want the entire list, that's also on the infographic. But as far as notable names for each list, Zadarius Smith, 33 years young, he is gone. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, speaking of special teamers, he is gone. Emmanuel Mosley, Allen Robinson, Teddy Bridgewater. Technically, again, stop by for a cup of coffee, but I think he's kind of enjoying his coaching life now. By the way, did you see that it was like $200,000? They call it like improper benefits, but he was literally just like paying for his players to have a good quality of life while being on his team, and they either fined him or suspended him or something like that. It's like, okay, he's their coach. Like, what do you want him to do? Like, just have his players not eat and not have pads? Like, I don't understand that at all. But
yeah, you said he's enjoying. You said he's enjoying his coaching life. Not at the moment with the sanctions, but yes, good on you, Teddy Two Gloves, for doing the right thing by your players. And I understand the perceived unfairness from whatever it is, the Miami-Dade League or whatever athletic league they're in, saying, nope, can't do it. Everybody's got to be absolutely even. I understand, but it's a spirit of the law thing for me. I'm like, I know what you're trying to keep from happening, but he's not buying them limo rides, right? He's buying them food and supplies to play football. So yeah, I'm with you. What do you want him to do? Not do that? So support the decision, but it's not a very fun time for him right now.
Picking it back up here, again, a lot of the names that you hear about in this section are guys that unfortunately got hurt because a lot of Lions got hurt last year. Carlton Davis, Kevin Zeitler. As far as retentions, Levi Onwuzurike, who has struggled with injuries in his own right, but man, I really, really loved him coming out of Washington. I still do think that he's a good rotational player for them when he's on the field. He got re-signed for $4 million. Kirby Joseph got the bag at the top of the safety market, $21.25 million, and worth every penny, especially with his penchant for picking the ball off. Wish that he would tackle a little bit more responsibly, but if you want an impact player who can get you turnovers, Kirby Joseph's your guy. Dan Skipper, swing tackle / fullback / sometimes big slot receiver. Brought him back. Tim Patrick, one of, at least pre-injury, one of my favorite glue guy type receivers in the league. That's, everybody's favorite wide receiver 4, really good contested catcher. Derek Barnes got extended at $8 million a year. I thought that was pretty appropriate value considering his role for them. And then for third-party additions, this is a team that tends to draft well, so they tend to pay their own guys because there's a lot of guys to pay. Typically don't have a lot of third-party additions, but they had a couple big ones this year, most notably DJ Reed. This is a very man coverage heavy team, as we talked about earlier, and DJ Reed is a very, very good man corner. Got him at $16 million. And Roy Lopez, they brought him in to round out the IDL rotation, about $3.5 million. One note about DJ Reed, and EJ, feel free to give me your opinion on this as well. DJ Reed at $16 million versus a combined $42 million a year in reported AAV for Sauce and Brandon Stevens. Who's spending their money more wisely, Detroit or the Jets?
Well, you know I love Sauce, so that's a leading question. And again, one
Fine,
of
how
the
about
best.
this? Brandon Stevens at 12 versus DJ Reed at 16. Who's spending their money more wisely?
Oh, yeah, that makes it very, very easy and a bit cleaner. I will absolutely take DJ Reed in that particular Price is Right game.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that Reed was quote unquote only 16 million. Like, I get it, he's on the older side for a corner, and this is the most injured position group statistically in the NFL. Like, corners get hurt more than even running backs do. So, he's 29. Corners tend to fall off a cliff once they approach this age. I get it, but like, you can't look at what DJ Reed did last year when he was arguably the best corner on the Jets, even over Sauce, and think that that's a $16 million a year player. Like, that's a really, really good value. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. Like, maybe there's something that I don't know when it comes to like medical sheets or something. But I thought that was a great signing. So they did set themselves up overall to have as few glaring needs as humanly possible going into the draft. This was actually one of the teams where I honestly wasn't sure what they were going to do, because there wasn't a whole lot sticking out that I was like, oh, they have to do this in the first 32 picks. So they could kind of do whatever they wanted to, which obviously is a very advantageous position to be in for a GM.
It's what you hope to do with a sort of multi-pronged approach. And earlier you said, oh, the Detroit Lions, in terms of coaching, well, they promote from within. In terms of their free agency strategy, they re-signed 21 of their own guys just this offseason. So again, Brad Holmes and Campbell have decided who their guys are, what a Lions player is, and they know when they're rewarding their own. If you are on board and on program and helping this team contribute, they're going to re-sign you. And that is one of the largest re-sign classes throughout this entire series. And I think it's, again, just another indication of, look, we're 3 years into this. We know what you need to be, who you need to be on this team. And if you do that, we're going to reward you. And don't think that players around the league don't see that. Because there's a lot of teams that espouse those values, and then it comes time to re-sign their own guys, and they're like, we're gonna let you go for a cheaper option. Detroit ends up re-signing 20 plus guys before they get into the draft. And in round one, pick number 28, they take Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. And this is another move to buttress that interior defensive line and make sure nobody can run the ball on them. Now, a lot of people lean on Tyleik and think that he has a bunch of pass rush potential. I'm not among those, but I don't know that it matters as much. I don't see him as a high pass rush potential interior defender. However, he is an elite run defender. One gap, two gap, inside, outside. I don't really care where you put him. He is technically sound. He is really strong, very difficult to displace. And one of those guys that certainly the Lions are hoping on, that you can just count on him and say, you're going to do this and we're going to worry about everything else. They prioritize that to a strong extent. And again, when you're 15-2, you're going to get one of the very last picks in the first round. Notably, this was a draft that was very even on talent after the very, very high picks. So they look at Tyleik with the fit and his skills and their needs and say, this is a very solid player. We're going to come out, we're not going to come out with a bust from the first round. And I think they're comfortable with that. And he does have some ability to use explosion to maybe collapse the pocket from the inside, but as a pure, is he a rusher? Yeah. Is he a rusher? I heard a lot of people throughout the draft process, I think he's got rush upside. And I was like, I would say he's got pocket crushing upside, but you're not going to get a lot of fancy moves out of Tyleik Williams.
Tyleik Williams' pick makes a lot of sense because he shores up one of the only real weaknesses that this team had, other than obviously injuries, and that was just being able to bow up against the run. Like, they needed to improve their interior defensive line rotation on first down, not just on third down.
And he is elite there, so I think the fit is very good. We talk about landing spots for all rookies. This is a very good landing spot. They are expecting him to do exactly what he's great at. Round 2, number 57, a pick they got from the Rams. This is Tate Ratledge, the guard out of Georgia, who, even though he was injured and then had tightrope surgery to repair that, came back, was clearly playing on one leg in a lot of the tape that I watched, he was still effective. And as he got healthier, his tape got better and better and better. And I know everybody concentrates on the mullet, and they should. It is absolutely glorious, but he is a wild athlete. I posted a slow-mo clip that we'll show here of him doing the long jump from the field at the combine and standing broad. It was staggering to see both his vertical jump, his standing broad, his agility out on the field, and then his power on tape. He was, in my view, easily the best of the 3 interior Georgia offensive linemen. All of them got drafted, and rightfully so, but Ratledge was at the top of my list.
Oh my God.
What?
So we can leave this in because this episode already happened. Steelers news, sorry. TJ Watt, $41 million a year. He's 31.
I'm aware.
Like, we got to see the guarantees, but what the 108 guaranteed at signing. Oh my God. He's 31.
So everything we said in the Steelers episode about, I don't think he's going to get traded. I think they believe that they're going to load up with talent. And I said, if they were to move on from TJ, then I wouldn't understand their approach at all. This is just more of their mindset and driving down the same line they've been on. It is an extreme version of that, but
bro, like, I get it, he's TJ Watt, but my God.
Yeah.
I didn't think he would get $41 million a year. All right, sorry, we can continue with the Lions now. I know we're not going to get a chance to talk about it during the series because the Steelers episode already happened, but Jesus, EJ.
Ding, ding, ding. Fantastic.
Where were we?
We were talking about Tate Ratledge and the fact that he was a guard at Georgia, but they are now going to try him at center. I think he has everything he needs from a physical and mental standpoint to make that work. Following a franchise legend is always tough, and Ragnow is nothing if not a Detroit Lions legend, especially in terms of toughness, but overall play level has been extremely high during his tenure there. It's big shoes to fill for Tate Ratledge, but having talked to him one-on-one, he doesn't lack for self-confidence, and that is not improper. He's been able to back that up on the field, and I think he's wired the right way. I think he probably had his first meeting with Dan Campbell, and Dan went, if we can get that guy, I want him on our team. He does fit. He probably got whatever their version of the lion sticker is on the draft board as like, oh yeah, not only is this guy a physical fit for what we need, but he's also a personality fit. I like Tate Ratledge's prospects moving into the Lions line, even if the expectations are going to be extremely high.
One of the most underrated storylines across the NFL is his transition to center, and more specifically, his transition to center while not being present at camp, because he's, again, one of these second rounders, at least as of the day we're recording this. Obviously, the TJ Watt news came in 10 minutes ago, so you can put together when exactly we're recording this. It's July 17th. There's a couple second rounders that have already signed. The Texans signed theirs. The Browns signed Texans and Brown both signed one of theirs. And the Texans are at fault here because they gave Jaden Higgins a fully guaranteed deal, which then slowed down everything else because all the other teams are like, we're not giving fully guaranteed second round contracts. And every other agent's like, well, Houston did, so now you kind of have to. But Tate Ratledge is one of those players. And I don't besmirch him or blame him for trying to get the deal that now is precedent, which is fully guaranteed. But at the same time, you're making a position switch. You have to learn all the protections. You have to get used to working with Jared Goff in an offense that has a brand new play caller.
You'd like to be there.
You'd like to be there.
You'd like to be there for that, but we should see that dam break. Alfred Collins signed with the Niners. He was the first of the second-round picks outside of those two that got fully guaranteed money to come to an agreement. I know that people are angry on both sides. We won't spend a lot of time debating it, but I do believe the rest of the second rounders are going to start to sign pretty quickly. We've already seen that this morning. Shamar Turner signed in Chicago, and we're going to see those dominoes start to fall because these players want to be in camp, and I think agents are going to agree that they're going to get a higher percentage guaranteed than previous contracts, but not 100%. For Alfred Collins, I think it was about 88%. And that was a higher percentage than the slot that he was drafted at the year before. So I think we might have finally found that compromise, but it's been one of the more frustrating components of getting these guys in camp during this off season.
2 hours later.
In the third round, the 70th pick, this was one that surprised me. It's one they got from the Jaguars. Isaac Tesla, wide receiver out of Arkansas. Now, to be fair, we were on the field with Isaac Tesla at the combine, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? Because he moves better. I should have heard of him. I should have seen him. I had watched his compatriot, Andrew Armstrong, who I really liked. Tesla looked like a wide receiver that should have been picked in the first 2 rounds. I immediately went back to his tape as soon as I got home from the combine and went, oh, that's why he didn't get picked. They didn't use him a lot at Arkansas, but from a physical perspective, he is tall, he is fast, he has very good hands, can jump out of the gym. He has all the potential in the world, but he is raw like steak. He has got a lot of learning to do.
Hey,
and
some of us like our steak blue, EJ. So
you are an Isaac Tesla fan, and I'm not.
I am.
I am not knocking the player. I like the player. I was very surprised they picked him on day 2 ahead of many other receivers I had rated more highly. They are absolutely counting on their coaching staff to develop a guy that not only has raw traits, but from every interview I've seen with him before and since, the right mindset about I can do what they asked me to. This is more a case of they didn't ask me to do all those things. I think it's half and half. I think some of that's true. And you did see the flashes when they asked him to do. There was a really fun double move. And I say that in singular because he had about 30 receptions overall at Arkansas in the last year. But there was one double move where you went, oh, that's it. I've seen it. Like, he can do it. If he can do that in the NFL, and I think he can, you're going to have something. But you're also going to have to work on all the rough edges because they are there, and getting that polish against the highest level of competition in the world is tough. I was simply surprised by the draft slot. I like the talent. I like the player. I like the mental makeup, but it was a little bit early for me.
Have you seen his one-handed catch highlight reel from Hillsdale College?
Yes, I have.
Like, bro.
Yeah.
There's something there.
There's a lot.
I believe in it.
And there's a lot there. That's the thing is he has, when I say he has all the tools, that's not hyperbole. He has all the tools. He can do all that stuff. He's going to have to learn how to do it consistently because we've seen a lot of receivers enter the NFL with tremendous tools, but they didn't know how to put them all together, or they didn't work to put them all together, or they didn't do it hard enough. Everybody, when you see all these workout videos, everybody's working in the offseason. The cornerbacks, the defensive linemen, the wide receivers, the running backs, everybody's working super hard because they know when the season kicks off, they're going to have to do it against the best in the world. I'm not saying Isaac Tesla cannot do that physically. He clearly can. As an athlete, he is a specimen. And you do see those flashes, but they were so few and far between that it was like, all right, I'm not going to call him a project because, again, we've seen it demonstrated. We've seen the one-handed catches. We've seen the, big flash double moves and the times when he was able to beat people downfield and come up with explosive plays. Just not many of them. You're holding the total number of attempts in your hands at Arkansas is about 30 plus. So it is a strong belief in the projection that he can hit his ceiling because that ceiling is way, way up there. Moving on to day 3, round 5, pick number 171 from the Cowboys, a compensatory pick. This is Miles Frazier, the guard out of LSU. I thought this was great value. Now, I'm not sure what I don't know about Miles Frazier. I thought he certainly could have been drafted sooner. that is a boon to the Lions. They need to bolster that interior depth because, as Ben Johnson, their former offensive coordinator, said when he was at the combine this year, it's not about your top 5. It's about your top 8 or 9. You cannot make it through an NFL season with 5 offensive linemen. You have got to have good reserves. And so getting a player like Miles Frazier with a lot of SEC experience way down in round 5 at 171, I thought was a really good pickup for them. Then we get into round 6 and 2 round 7 picks. The round 6 pick, 196, a pick they got from the Buccaneers. Ahmed Hassanein, the outside linebacker from Boise State, who is one of the best stories in the NFL draft in terms of didn't grow up in this country, didn't start playing football for a long time, is a tremendous athlete, and has a thirst for learning that I think is probably Dan Campbell's bag. He probably met this kid and saw the attitude and the ability and said, you're not there yet, but if you're still on the board in day 3, we might come get you because we like your physical prospects and how much you've progressed over a short period of time playing football at a high level at Boise State. So immediate impact, I don't think so. Absolute Dan Campbell player from mindset and physical stature. Yeah, he's a hammer physically.
Yeah, culture-wise, I think he fits. As a player, he's one of the ones where I think the stats lie to you a little bit as far as like pressure rate and everything. Because I watched the tape going into Shrine and I was like, I don't know, he's kind of stiff. I don't know if I really see the athleticism. And then I watched him up close and personal. I was like, yeah, it's not. I didn't see it. But, it's 6th round pick. Like, okay. Like, he plays hard. I think he's going to be great in the room. We'll see. We'll see. I was less enthused by that one. The Miles Frazier pick I liked a lot. Really good pass protector. This is just one of those teams that, again, they take shots on mid-round guards and they see if they can develop them into starters. It's worked before. They're going to see if they could try it again. So, like, this young offensive line duo of Ratledge and Frazier, I think has potential to be a pretty good payoff for them. As far as their last 2 picks, I actually didn't watch as much Dan Jackson, but I did watch Dominic Lovett, and I liked him a lot.
Okay, we're not going to have Dan Jackson or Isher on this podcast.
I'll let you take him.
This is one of their sneakiest, best picks. Dan Jackson, safety out of Georgia, the other safety out of Georgia this year, and rightfully so. He's a fun kind of sneaky little playmaker. He's in the right spot, the right time. He's not a stunning athlete. He's not a bad athlete. We're talking about a guy that played safety and held up in the SEC, but not necessarily difference maker, but very, very smart. Uses all the gifts he has at a maximum to get him in the 7th round. I don't know if there's something going on with his health. I thought that was a great pick from a value standpoint. If Isaac TeSlaa was early, Dan Jackson was late for me. And you could talk about Dominic.
Averaging it out to 2 5th-rounders.
Just slide them both down to the middle a little bit.
And as for Lovett, like, again, he's another one of these guys where when you go through the process and you're either doing all-star games or you're doing combine. With Lovett specifically, it was combine. That was where I first got to see him live. And there's always these guys where you might have watched like a game going into it and it just happened to be like a game that, or maybe not the game you should have chosen to watch because you just don't really see anything. And then you see him up close in person, you watch him move, but more specifically, you watch them move next to guys that are very highly rated. And you're like, which is the day 2 pick? Like, who am I supposed to be more impressed with? Like, Lovett, I thought as a mover was really, really impressive up close in person. Super snappy. Him and who's the kid the Niners drafted in the 4th round? Watkins.
Jordan Watkins.
I came away from combine being impressed with them specifically. And Lovett, he's one of those guys where in the gauntlet drill, like, people don't appreciate how useful the gauntlet drill is for receiver evaluation. And I know Eisen always gets annoyed by this drill because he's like, what's the point of catching the ball and then immediately dropping it? And it's like, no. The point of the gauntlet is to see how fast you run through it. Are you thinking while running? Can you stay on a line naturally and locate the ball while constantly switching back and forth? Like, it's about how quickly you can locate the ball and secure a catch. And yeah, I know you kind of drop it immediately, but if you're running the gauntlet at 16 and a half miles an hour versus like 19 miles an hour, that is a big difference. And you need to be able to run at full speed and stay on a line, because it means that you can hit a landmark without looking at that landmark, and you can turn your eyes and locate the ball quickly. It's literally just a drill that says, how good are you at running crossing routes? And Lovett was motoring through that drill. So again, he first caught my eyes at combine. Then I went back and watched a couple more games. I was like, ooh, there's something there. Like he might make the team, if not practice squad, but he's got a shot.
Yeah, and he's got speed, and you're talking about, again, SEC schools stacking up speedy wide receivers. And as we try and build a book on GMs, we're now deep enough into the Brad Holmes era that we know that A, they like players from big schools, and B, they like the SEC. And that's not a shocker to anybody that's followed the NFL draft, but 5 of these players from the SEC, we got Georgia, Arkansas, LSU, and then 2 more Georgia players. They're fans of Bulldogs. They've sort of taken over where Ryan Pace left off, picking Georgia Bulldogs in the NFC North, and trying to replicate a little of that Howie success, right? Let's leverage the Georgia program as strongly as we can. A very good draft overall for this organization. I see the fits for most of them. And again, I think up top, it's going to, when we look back at it, it's going to be a very solid draft. And then if Lovett or Jackson or both tend to hit, we're going to say the same thing. They had hits at the top. They got some depth at the bottom. These are all players that are going to contribute.
As far as notable UDFAs, 2 really stick out. Jackson Meeks, the receiver out of Syracuse, as well as Caden Prescorn, the tight end out of Mississippi. As far as Syracuse weapons go, and I know, you're a Q's guy. You grew up in the area, so you have a soft spot in your heart for Orange players. Meeks was probably the 4th guy down on the list as far as how I would rate all the Syracuse weapons last year. And honestly, their best receiver didn't even come out. Pena, well, he transferred, but I thought he might have been the best one out of all of them. And so again, he was one of those guys where it's like, yeah, he's probably a late 7, a priority UDFA pickup if you're looking for somebody who can compete to be like, not even like a rotational receiver, probably more so like your 5th guy who's probably going to be a special teamer. And if you really take on injuries, you can give him some snaps. I wasn't overly impressed with him, but at the same time, like, it's worth a dart throw as a UDFA. Prescorn, I actually think, does legit have a shot to make the roster, though. Like, out of the 2, if you ask me who has a better chance of being like not just a roster filler, but a contributor, it's probably Prescorn for me.
Yeah, Prescorn as well, in terms of, I think he has TE2 potential. Probably is going to start out as more of a TE3, maybe red zone specialist. Sneaky bit of a route runner, a little bit faster than you think. Made a lot of catches in that, Ole Miss offense. And it just was one of those guys. They had so many guys they could target in that Ole Miss offense. And like you talked about glue guys earlier, it was like a glue catcher, right? He was not going to be their highlight or their focal point by any stretch, but every week it seemed like, oh man, made the catch to keep the drive going. Oh man, he surprised the safety, got 18 yards down the seam. Oh, who'd they go to in the red zone when the other guys got double teamed? They went to Caden Prescorn, he scored. I think he's got talent to make this team for sure. It's not going to be as TE1 or anywhere near to start off, but eventually I could see him being a very good tight end 2 down the road, because he's a versatile guy. He's got good size, very good in the pass game. Okay as an angle blocker in the run game. He's not his strength. Certainly wasn't asked to do a ton of that at Ole Miss, but he's got some of it in there. And that kind of versatility, again, picking up dollars that other teams drop. I thought Caden Prescorn was definitely draftable, and to get him as a UDFA, good score for Brad Holmes and his staff.
So that brings us to our final segment. This is going to be maybe our longest episode of the summer at this point. Who is the identity before, or rather, what was their identity before? What do they want their identity to be now? And what is the goal for this season? The identity is less scheme-based here. I think the identity is culture-based here. It's about toughness. It's about physicality, relentlessness. The next man up culture that they've built the kind of fuck you culture that they've built, it permeates everything that they do. And I almost feel like the scheme nuances are immaterial, because no matter what type of plays they're running on offense or defense, it's going to be done with aggression and physicality and an attitude that you just can't teach. And I think overall that is the Lions' identity. It's not about what they call, it's about how they execute what they call. And as for what they want their identity to be now, that, again, like swap out the coordinator, swap out the center, swap out a whole bunch of guys. Tons of roster turnover here. But that is still their identity. That is still the core of what makes the Lions, no matter who's on the field and who's calling the plays. So I think it's just kind of more of the same, and I mean that in a good way. As for what the goal is for this season, I think it's got to be winning the Super Bowl, right? It's not enough for this team to just win the division and prove that they can do that without Johnson and Glenn and Ragnow. Like, that's not enough. Like, the goal is win the Super Bowl, because this team went through too much last year to just be satisfied with winning the NFC North and just be satisfied with being the 1 seed. Like, if they can do everything that they did last year through all that adversity, I don't really think it's a feel-good story to make the division round again or to make the championship game again. Like, they've done that, even through everything that they've been through. Like, they have to win the Super Bowl, I think, to feel satisfied with this journey. And it has been a journey, but like they need the payoff now. And there's really no other way to put it. Like, the final chapter is laid out. They just got to write it. And if they don't this year, it almost feels similar to the Ravens, right? Where it's like, if they don't do it this year, you're going to look back and think, God, what if?
They clearly have their eye on the top step, and that's rightfully so. I think Dan Campbell's going to keep this team very focused, and the first step in their journey for this year is going to be winning the division. He is not going to let them sort of let their eyes off that prize and let that slip and then have to go in as a wild card team. Like, he knows that that's step one, but to your point, that's not where it ends for them. He's going to make sure first things happen first. That is, continue to dominate the division, continue to dominate at home and on the road, win this division, and then it is a big and heavy and then. They're not necessarily looking at knocking off the rest of the people in the division. They know they have to do it as a first step, and I think they'll get that done because this is a well-coached and very disciplined team. But it doesn't stop there. Then it is eyes on Philadelphia at this point and the other powers in the NFC to beat them and get to the Super Bowl. That is clearly the goal for this team. And I don't think Dan Campbell, especially as a leader, is going to allow them to do any less. If he was going to give them weeks off, if he was going to give them a break or moral victories, it would have been last year. Oh, we lost our best pass rusher. Oh, we're down 21 guys overall. Like, okay, I understand we didn't win guys. He didn't do it then. He's not going to do it now. And there are going to be no excuses for this team, and they are going to continue to push to be the best team, not only in the conference, but in the NFL. That is their goal. They came super close last year, and I don't think they're lowering their standards one bit. There's no drop off for, we lost our quarterback in the offseason, or we've had to reset because of salary cap. No, none of that. Yeah, we have new coordinators. And if you had to ask Dan Campbell about that, I think he'd say, so what? Like, the expectations are the same, and we're going to go do it again.
All right. Fun show, long one, but a good one. If you're a Lions fan, reminder, if you want all the stats that we talked about today, those are over in the companion infographic, which are on our Patreon. You can find that at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen if you're watching the YouTube version of this show. Tomorrow, we have a bonus episode coming out, also on the Patreon, which is our NFC North Division recap. And on the division recap shows that we do every single Friday, we pick our division winner, we pick our rookies of the year, our coach of the year, offensive and defensive player of the year for the division. So if you want even more Lions content, spoiler alert, we talk a lot about Lions players in that show, you can find that on the Patreon as well. For the rest of you who are not patrons, we'll see you back here Monday, talking AFC South. So we're talking Titans on Monday and then Jags on Tuesday. So see you back here for that. And until then.